stay seated during the duration of our speaker. Now help me enthusiastically welcome our speaker, Corrine.
Corrine, alcoholic? Okay. I'm a little nervous. It's a little intimidating being up here under the bright lights. Congratulations to all the chip getters, and welcome to the newcomers. Like I said, my name is Corrine. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is May 21st, 2010. Hopefully I will come up on 14 years in a couple months. So what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I know a lot of you have heard my story many times. Probably, well, a lot of times. So I'll just start from the beginning. I was born in Gallup, New Mexico. I am Native American. My mother's family is from Dulce, New Mexico. My father's family is from Chinle. I did not grow up on the reservation. I grew up in Flagstaff. I went to school there. I have a younger brother. He is kind of technically my half-brother, but he's my brother. I come from a very small family. It was me, my mother, my brother, and my grandmother. My grandfather died in 2009, and my uncle died in 2011. I grew up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. My mother was an alcoholic. She was in AA. I would go to meetings with her. If I can remember correctly, I actually celebrated my first birthday in her treatment facility. And I went to meetings with her. I went to potlucks with her. I went to the dances. She was on the Roundup committee in Flagstaff. So I was pretty much of service before I even got here. I helped out selling t-shirts. I helped out in hospitality. She would make fry bread and I would help her. I would sell candy. I would play with the other kids their parents were in the program. And I had a pretty good childhood. I didn't know my mom was in the program. I didn't know she was an alcoholic. I've never seen her drink. So I just thought, she's got a lot of friends, and her friends have a lot of kids for me to play with, So I grew up, I went to high school, I went to Sonala High School, I graduated, and then the following week after my graduation, I started community college. It was not what I wanted to do, but my mother pushed me to do it, and looking back, it was probably the best thing that I've ever done. During college, I worked at the community college, actually, and I went to school, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my future, and I decided that I wanted to be an animator. So I signed up to go to the Phoenix Art Institute, and I got in, and I started that in 2003, I think, and it didn't last very long. I took my first drink when I was 19, and my mom always told me that, I don't ever want you to drink, If you ever take a drink, I'm going to kill you. It's like, okay. So that kind of, stays in your brain. So I always thought, drinking was bad. So at 19, I'm at my friend's house, and we're hanging out, and her boyfriend bought a 6-pack of Smirnoff Ice, and she asked me if I wanted one. And at first I hesitated, because I knew if I had one, I'd be in trouble. Like some magical radar would go off and my mom would know that I had a sip of alcohol. So I had one, and it's Smirnoff Ice. You can't really get too much of a reaction out of that. At least I didn't. But, so I had that, and I didn't drink until I went to college. I moved down to Phoenix. I got an apartment. Two of my girlfriends came down and helped me move, and we were at the pool one afternoon, and we saw a couple guys, and they asked us if we wanted to go to a party, and we were like, sure. In my gut, I was like, this is probably not a good idea, but I did it anyway because I wanted to fit in. I never really felt that I fit in growing up, because I'm different from everybody else. I don't have blonde hair and blue eyes. I don't come from an upper class family. So I tried everything I could to fit in. So we went to the party, and, everybody's drinking. I had some beer, and I'm not much of a socializer. I'm really quiet, keep to myself. So I grabbed a cup and I went outside and I sat on the steps and drank by myself. And everyone else was having fun, and one guy came out and he talked to me for a little bit, and it was probably like 10 o'clock, maybe 11. I was like, this is lame, and I went home. And, later on, I started dating one of those guys, and that was like my first serious relationship. And we partied every weekend. I was going to school, and my drinking got progressively more. And I remember turning 21 and going to the bar for the first time. And then I had what did I have? I had a Long Island iced tea. It was the worst drink ever. And, I think we went to another bar after that. And, my drinking progressed, like I said. And drinking on the weekends became sometimes during the week. Because of my drinking and partying, I got kicked out of school. And I remember getting the letter in the mail and feeling so ashamed and disappointed that I had let my family down. And it was a disappointment. They were counting on me to go to college, and get a degree and do big things, and I drank it away. I wanted to party and be cool. So I moved back to Flagstaff, and I continued drinking. I went to beauty school, and I did beauty school, and then I moved to Lake Havasu, and that's where my drinking really took off. While living there, I did a lot of things I'm not proud of. I became a liar, a cheat, and a thief. And I started blacking out. And I, again, got into a relationship. Things weren't working out. I didn't have a job. Me and my roommate got in a huge argument. The lease on our house was up, and I had to get out of there. And so I moved back to Flagstaff again and continued drinking. And towards the end of my drinking, in 2009, my grandpa got really sick and he was in hospice. And my grandpa was everything to me. He was my father figure growing up. He taught me a lot of things. He taught me how to drive. He taught me, how to go. We went fishing together. We would go hiking together. I really looked up to him. So him being in hospice, it was really hard. It was really hard to see him like that. And I'm grateful that I was able to be by his side when he took his last breath. And after that, me and my mom drove back to Flagstaff because him and my grandma were here in Prescott. We drove back to Flagstaff. I got on the phone, called my friend. I was like, what are you guys doing? I need a drink. And I got wasted. And I don't remember what happened after that. So then towards the end of my drinking, I'm in downtown Flagstaff with some friends. And I remember we were bar hopping, and one of my favorite drinks was Jameson. So I'd have a Jameson and Coke. And then I think I had some wine. And then I think I had some rum and Coke. And then I went back to Jameson. And then I think I had some shots. And then I blacked out. And then it was time to go home. And I vaguely remember walking to my car. And somebody that I knew was like, you know, they needed a ride. I was like, oh, I got you. I can take you. And clearly I was not in the state to drive home. And they're like, are you sure you're okay to drive? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. It's no big deal. And they're like, okay, well, I think I'm just going to walk. I'm like, all right, whatever. So then I blacked out again. I came to on Route 66 with those beautiful blue and red lights in my rearview mirror. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I'm freaking out. And the officer comes up to my window, asks me if I've been drinking. I was like, yeah. And he's like, I need your license and registration. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like thinking to myself, just play it cool. Just play it cool. Be sober for the next 10 minutes. Gather yourself. And I'm reaching for my purse, trying to find my driver's license. And I think I dumped everything out on my seat. And I was like, I can't find it. And later, you know, come to find out, it was sitting there the whole time on the seat, and he could see it. So he's like, I need you to get out of the car. And I was like, okay. So I get out of the car, and you know, everything's a little fuzzy. It's really bright. And he's like, I need you to do a sobriety test. And I was like, okay. So he's like, you know, standing there, and he's like, I need you to put your arms out. I need you to balance on one foot and touch your nose with this hand. And I'm like watching him. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I was like, I'm not doing that. He's like, excuse me? I was like, I am not doing that. He's like, okay, well, then you're under arrest. And I was like, okay. And I was not going to fight it. I knew I was in trouble, and I knew there was nothing I could do. The officer asked if there was anybody that I could call to come pick up my car, and I had to think about it. And my phone at the time, I had a flip phone, and I couldn't remember my password to get into my phone. So I couldn't call my friends. I couldn't call my mom. And if I tried calling my brother, there's a good chance my mom was going to answer. So that was not a good idea. So I was like, no, there's nobody I can call. And I think he kind of felt sorry for me, because he's like, are you sure? Like, there's nobody? And I was like, no. And I'm like thinking to myself, I couldn't even remember anybody's phone number if I tried, you know. So I went to jail, and I spent roughly 4 days in jail. And it was scary. It was a scary time for me. I remember being in the holding cell and just being so scared. And luckily I was the only one in there, and I was sitting on the cement seat, just like playing over and over in my head what I was going to tell my mother. Because I knew I had one phone call, and it was more than likely going to be her. So I was, you know, they got me all checked in. They got me in my blue suit, and I went to my cell, and I spent my time in jail. And lo and behold, the girl that I was roommates with was some girl that I went to like high school with or something. She's like, "Oh, you're Corrine." I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "How do I know you?" She's like, "We went to school together." And she's like talking to me, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is horrible." Like, I remember her from school, and she was not very nice. So it was a little scary. So I'm in jail, and I remember having my first appearance in front of the judge, and he's telling me my charges and all of the things that I did, and I'm an endangerment to the community, and I'm sitting there in this room with all of these other inmates looking at a screen, and I'm kind of embarrassed because, I'm in a room with other people. They're going to judge me. They're going to think all of these things about me. And, I'm in there for a DUI. Like, nobody cares, But, so I was looking at charges close to $3,000. My car was repoed. I was looking at possible an additional 30 days in jail, a breathalyzer put into my car, and I think I needed to go to like these classes, these DUI classes. And I was just like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? And I remember my mom came and visited me, and I felt so ashamed. And all of that self-doubt and negativity just came back, and it just completely blanketed me. And I felt horrible, and I couldn't even look her in the face. I couldn't even look at her. And I just felt horrible. And she was obviously very disappointed. And after that, I had another hearing that was going to determine what was going to happen. And that's when they told me that, they let me out by the skin of my teeth. I think if my mom and my grandma weren't there, because I could hear them on the other end, they were actually at the courthouse with the judge. And my mom, I remember kind of hearing her. She was just like pleading with the judge, like, let her come home with me. I'll send her to some meetings, this won't happen again, all this stuff. So I'm very grateful for that. So I got to go home, and I remember my grandma and my brother came and picked me up. And I didn't really expect my mom to come pick me up, but I had hoped. And we went to McDonald's because I was like starving. I barely ate. I lost like 10 pounds in jail because I didn't eat any of the food. And I remember going home and walking into my room and just being like, this is so surreal. Like, am I really like in my room right now? Like, I'm staring at my bed. I'm looking out the window. I'm actually here. Like, it took me a minute to wrap that around my brain, that I wasn't in jail anymore, that I was home. And I was right where my feet were. And so I, eventually talked to my mom, and she's like, you have to go to an AA meeting. She's like, you have to. You're going tomorrow. And I was like, okay, fine. And that's where it started. So I remember my stepdad took me to my first meeting at the Alano Club in Flagstaff, and I didn't pick up a 24-hour chip. It was one chip that I don't have. But I went to a meeting. I didn't have to, but I got a piece of paper signed by the person that chaired the meeting, proof that I was there, and I went to a meeting every single day. I didn't have my car. I lived like 20 minutes outside of town, but I made it to a meeting every single day. And I was just 100% willing. I jumped in with both feet. I did not want to be that disappointment that my mother saw. I didn't want to be that drunk person, driving in the streets. I didn't want to be the horrible cheat, lie, thief that I was while I was drinking. I was done. Those 4 days in jail really changed me. And I'm glad that's all it took. So my first 30 days, I got a sponsor. I got a service commitment at the Flagstaff Roundup. I helped set up chairs. I helped set up lights for the dance. I met some women with some good sobriety. I started going to women's meetings, and I started working my steps. And I did everything that was asked of me. And my life started to change, 6 months into my sobriety, I got a call from my public defender, bless you. And, this was the call that I was waiting for, because I was, waiting to see if I'd get that additional 30 days of jail. And so, prior to that, my family and I were making arrangements for the holidays. We were going to celebrate, like if I was going to go in November, we'd have Thanksgiving early. If I was going to go in December, we'd, wait to celebrate Christmas, all this stuff. We had it all arranged. I remember going to my women's meeting and talking to all the ladies, getting their phone numbers. There were certain women that were going to come into the jail and visit me. And, there were going to be certain women that I could call if I needed to. There was also an AA program called Exodus that I was going to do, because I could get to a meeting every day. I could still do my meeting every day in jail. So I had a plan. I had it all planned out, and I was talking to my sponsor. Of course, she was going to come talk to me. And I get the call from my public defender, and he was like, the officer that arrested you got fired. So your charges have been dropped. It still makes my heart stop. And I knew right then that I had higher power, and that everything that I heard in the rooms, the miracles and all that stuff, it was true, because it was happening. Stuff like this just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen to me. And so getting that phone call, I remember just like falling to my knees, and it still makes me cry. Just falling to my knees, crying, and being so thankful to my higher power. And it was all because I did the work. I did the work, I did what I was supposed to do, and I just had faith that it was all going to work out. And it did. And so, I continued to do what I needed to do. I eventually got my car back. I got my license back. I still went to a meeting every single day. Sometimes I would go to 4 meetings a day. I pretty much lived at the Alano Club. I remember I would take a book and I would sit under the Ramada and just read until the next meeting. And then if people came around, I would go fellowship, go have coffee, go eat, whatever, and then come back and go to the meeting. And then 11 months into my sobriety, I had my first sober relationship. Now I know why they say to wait your first year to get in a relationship. Looking back on it, it was pretty toxic. I didn't realize it. I was cleaning out my guest room today, and I found my journal from when I first got sober. And it was talking about my relationship with this person and all of the things that were happening. And I was like, gosh, that was so toxic. And I couldn't see it because I so badly wanted it to work. So, and then I got my first year, and I got my 1-year coin, and I spoke for the first time at the Friday night speaker meeting. in front of like 87 people, all crammed in this little room. A little intimidating. And then I started working as a housekeeper at a hotel. And in 2011, it was the beginning of February. I remember I was at work and my mom texted me and she said that my uncle passed away. And it was pretty bad. I don't know if it was from alcoholism, but he was in Alaska. He was in a shelter and they found him on the bathroom floor. I didn't have a really good relationship with my uncle growing up, mainly because he was an alcoholic. He was an active alcoholic all my life. And I remember he would always promise me things and never follow through with that. So I learned not to trust him. He can't, stand by his word. So when I got the call that he passed, I was kind of indifferent. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know if I was sad. I didn't know if I just didn't care. I was just kind of numb. And so I finished part of my job, and then I told my manager, I was like, I need to leave. Like, there's been a death in the family, and I need to go home. So that happened in my first year. Going through the steps for the first time with my sponsor, I had to be as thorough and honest as possible, and I found I also found that in my journal, my little notebook of, going through the steps, how it was unmanageable, being powerless and all that stuff, and what my higher power means to me, what my higher power looks like. And then I remember doing my 4th step, and, my mom being on there, some of my friends that I had wronged. And I remember telling my sponsor, I was like, there's a couple people on here that I can't, they want nothing to do with me. They could care less if I'm alive, let alone accept an apology from me, because I did some really horrible things. So she had me write a letter to each of these people. And so I did. And there was one person that I needed to make an amends to. And I was like, well, they live in Phoenix. I don't know if I can get a hold of them. And she's like, well, you can call. They're a phone call away. I was like, yeah, I guess. I didn't want to make the amends. Like, flat out, I didn't want to do it. So I go home after talking to my sponsor, and my phone rings, and it's that person. And they're like, hey, I'm going to be in town this weekend. Do you want to get together? And in my mind, I'm like, no, I'm busy, But of course, my higher power works through me. And I was like, yeah, let's get together. So I met them for coffee. I made my amends. And, they accepted my apology for what I had done. And they were very supportive, very supportive. And, that's kind of how my higher power is. If I don't want to do something, or I feel like I don't want to do something, my higher power will jump in and make it happen. Because that's how it works. My higher power has a wonderful sense of humor. He's made that very clear over the years. So did my 4th step. I think the hardest one out of all of those was to my mom. Actually having to sit in front of her and apologize for all the things that I had done. And she, of course, being in the program, accepted my apology, and, it was a lifelong amends from then on out, And I remember doing my 5th step with my sponsor. We drove out towards the San Francisco peaks, and we pulled off on a dirt road. And we sat on this big log by some trees, and I'm doing my fifth step. And after I did my fifth step, it was like that weight had been lifted, and I felt so much lighter. And the birds started singing, you know, and the sun seemed a little more brighter that day, you know, and it was pretty amazing. It was probably, you know, one of my first spiritual experiences. Another spiritual experience I had was I was a couple months sober, and I was having a really, really rough time. I had just gotten in a huge argument with my mom. I was having all these negative thoughts, and I was trying so hard not to act out in these thoughts, and it was actually scaring me. So I went in my room and I called my sponsor, and I'm telling her what's happening, and she's like, okay, you need to pray. I'm like, how is that going to help? Like, you don't understand what I'm saying to you. There's some things that I want to do that are not good. And she's like, you need to pray. She's like, get on your knees and pray. She's like, say the third step prayer and just ask God to hold you. And I was like, okay. And she's like, I gotta go. And she hung up. So I was like, okay. So I sat in my bed, and I'm like fuming with rage. Like, my body's hot, I'm shaking, and I'm trying to calm down. I'm sitting on my bed, and I'm like, okay. And I asked God to just hold me. And I said a prayer. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I sat there and I was breathing, and I'm asking my higher power to just hold me. And then all of a sudden, I felt this, I can't explain it, but I felt this weird, just like warm bubble engulf me. Everything was fine. And the anger went away, the resentment, all of that stuff was gone, and I was able to calm down and just be okay. So I was able to walk through that process. You know, I didn't act on what I was thinking because it was really bad. Probably would have been back to jail. But I was able to get through it, and, you know, I did the things that I was taught to do. You know, call my sponsor, pray about it, all that stuff. Next day I went to a meeting. And, you know, over the years, when I first had to come to believe in a power greater than myself, I didn't know what that looked like because I wasn't religious. I didn't grow up religious. I knew there was something, you know. And while I was out there drinking, I always had the foxhole prayers, you know, just get me out this time. I won't do it again. Help me get this person, you know. And that's how it was. That was my praying back then. And so I had a friend that I'd met, and I was probably about 4 years sober, and he was Jewish, and he practiced Judaism. And I started going to temple. And that was probably the first place that I actually felt comfortable. I didn't feel, because I've gone to church before. I've go to church with my grandma. I went to church one time with my friend, and I always felt so uncomfortable in those places. So I went to temple, and I didn't feel any of that. I felt like how you come to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. People are welcoming. They're like family. They're like, hi, how are you? I'm so-and-so. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. You know? And I felt safe. So I started going to temple almost every Saturday. And I actually almost converted. And I was learning Hebrew. I was doing all the things, you know. And I remember sitting in temple one day, and I had some stuff going on, and the rabbi was reading out of the Torah, and it was in Hebrew, and I was just following along, and all of a sudden, I just broke down and started crying. I don't know what it was from. I don't know if it was because of whatever I was dealing with before, but I was just like sobbing and crying my eyes out. And it was just, obviously it was something that I needed to do. And I felt better after that. But I did not convert. I I kind of did it for all the wrong reasons. I know that sounds bad. To get the guy. There we go. Go to any length, right? So I did some geographics in my sobriety. I moved to Phoenix a couple times, had a couple relationships, and then I finally ended up in Prescott in 2015. I remember I had just gotten out of a really bad relationship, and I was on my way to Askepaw in Flagstaff, and my car broke down. My engine blew, pretty much. And I was like, cool, this is just perfect. I don't have a job, I don't have a car, I don't have a place to live, and I'm stranded on the side of the freeway in the middle of nowhere. What am I going to do? I barely had phone service. Luckily, somebody I knew in the program in Flagstaff was able to come and get me. I went to Askepaw, had a really good time, got centered again, called my grandma, and she's like, well, you can come stay with me in Prescott. And I was like, okay, what else am I going to do? So I came to Prescott. It's not my first choice. And it was probably the best thing that's ever happened in my life. Again, my higher power stepped in and decided for me. And before 60 days, I was kind of going to meetings. I was kind of meeting people. I'm not an outgoing person. I'm not going to walk up to you and be like, hi, I'm Corrine, how are you? I'm new here. I'm not going to do that. I expect all of you to come to me and be like, oh my God, hi, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Of course, that never happens. It didn't happen to me. So I was like, forget you guys. I don't like your AA. It's not like Flagstaff AA, And so I I got on my pity pot, and I just got in a really, really low spot in my sobriety. I had about 5 years of sobriety, and I remember sitting in my car in the Fry's parking lot, and I was talking to my friend, and I was like, I want to end my life. Like, I have nothing to live for anymore. I don't have any friends, I don't have a sponsor, I don't have a fellowship, and of course, all of this is because of me. But I'm the type of person that's going to turn around and blame you, because that's all I know. That's all I know how to do is blame you. It's your fault, because I'm not doing what I need to do for myself. I was just, she talked me off the ledge. I went to a meeting. I started meeting women in the program. I started going to this thing called Soup for the Soul. Started talking to women there, getting phone numbers. I got a position on the Prescott Shoestring Roundup doing hospitality. And I met someone there. A lot of you know this person. They were doing coffee at the time. And my friend, Stephanie, who some of you know, her friend was in town and she was trying to play matchmaker. And she's like, what about that guy? And I was like, I don't know. And I think we introduced ourselves. And I was like, oh, hi, And I was a brat. I can still be a brat. But, still doing my stuff, going to meetings. I have a sponsor. I'm working my steps. I have service commitments. Life is good. I have a job. I'm doing things, And then this guy comes into my life, the coffee maker, and he offers to help me with an event. And he's like, you know, maybe you could just call me. And I was like, why would I do that? You know, and I was like, oh. The light came on. And, you know, we started seeing each other, going to meetings together. I had a home group at the time, and it was Toolbox. And that was my regular meeting. I was a GSR at that meeting. I got kind of pushed into that position. Nobody else wanted to do it. So like, how about you, Corrine? Why don't you be our GSR? And I was like, okay. So I was taught not to say no. So I'll do it. So I was a GSR for 3 years. And my boyfriend at the time, he was in service as well. So we would go to the area assemblies together. And he's active in his program. He has a sponsor. He's doing what he needs to do, you know, and things are okay. And, you know, I started dating, and, you know, after being a GSR, I was an alternate DCMC for area, which was really cool. It was during COVID, so it was mainly online, so I didn't really have to do anything. I did hospitality for the Prescott Shoestring Roundup. I did ASCII Paw and Flagstaff when I was up there. I've gone to conventions, roundups. Me and my now husband went to Red Road in Albuquerque, and that was amazing. We've gone to Zuni to hear a friend of ours speak, you know, to show support, and that was amazing. We've gone to Flagstaff, you know. I was taught, you know, just get in the car and don't ask questions, you know. And, yeah, I mean, I have a wonderful life. I do a lot of traveling. I got married this past year. You know, being in a relationship in sobriety is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And, but it's worth it. You know, it's definitely worth it. I have a sponsor who I talk to and I meet with every 2 weeks, try to meet every 2 weeks. You know, and I go to meetings as much as I can. I'm not perfect at my sobriety, but I'm sober. And I'm here, and I have friends. I have a wonderful family. You know, in 2020, my mother got sick with cancer, and she passed away. And I got to walk through that in sobriety. And it was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life. And I had support from a lot of people in this room who helped carry me through. Women that would call me. And, you know, my husband was there, of course. And just being there for my grandma and my brother, more importantly, and helping them through this. And I've just been trying to reconnect with my roots, you know, who I am as a person. You know, I'm Native American, but I don't know anything about my culture. I really don't know that much, you know, so I'm trying to get back down to that. I'm talking to my aunt who lives in Farmington, and I got to see her not that long ago and see my cousins. And my cousin actually invited me to her daughter's coming out ceremony. And that's amazing, you know? And I'm actually reconnecting with my father. I never thought that would happen again. And I've been meaning to tell my sponsor about that for a while. Surprise. But yeah, and you know, I started beading and just trying to get back to my roots, because when I have kids, I want to be able to pass on the traditions to them, you know, and keep it going for my mom's sake. So, my name is Corrine. I'm an alcoholic, and thank you for listening.